One. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Lunch Break. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we are hearing from Daniel Ambrosi. Daniel Ambrosi is recognized as one of the founding creators of the emerging AI art movement. Ambrosi's AI-augmented large-scale photographs incorporate the use of an enhanced version of Google's computer vision program DeepDream, which I'm sure we'll hear all about. Ambrosi's work appeared in our Infinite Potentials exhibition. Just as a reminder to our audience members, if you have a question for Daniel as he talks and as we have a conversation, please submit them in the Q&A chat box, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom window. And we will get to as many at the end as we have time for. So to start out, Daniel, if you want to bring us into full screen mode there and tell us what mediums you work in and what kinds of themes you focus on, that would be great.
Julia, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, 1 second. I'll tell you what happened here. Okay, you are
minor technical malfunction. Stay tuned.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so what happened was when I was trying to monitor on my laptop, because I was logged in twice, it booted me out of our main presentation.
Zoom was catching on to your
yeah,
screen there.
I tried to spoof it and it didn't like it at all. So I'm gonna go back to present mode here.
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear, and
great.
You're in full screen mode. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your work.
All right, so it really started with this desire to capture and convey the power of what I call special places. And what I mean by that are not just grand landscapes, but also cityscapes, and even occasionally I'll capture indoor spaces. I'm primarily a landscape guy, and found myself frustrated by the inability of a camera to capture in a single shot the real experience of great spaces. And over time, the short story there is that I discovered that to really communicate what you experience in a special place, you need to reach people not just visually, but also viscerally and cognitively. And another way of saying that is, you need to be able to share with people the space and the scale of a great space, of a great landscape, and make an image that not just takes their breath away, but makes them think. At least when I'm in places like that, I find myself waxing philosophical. So I realized that it took two things. One is to capture much more of the space than you would with a single shot. This is actually 42 shots, stitched and blended together using computational photography techniques. By all accounts, that sort of got to the first level of getting people to go, wow, feels like I can step right into that. But then, in my quest to also mess with people's expectations, because we should never really take for granted what we see. Seeing is a subjective act. It really is. It happens in the mind, not on the retina necessarily. I started working with an AI partner, a modified version of DeepDream from Google that I had a couple of engineers customize for me, and found a way to inject at a very fine scale unexpected details, not unlike kind of what the early Impressionists did with their expressive brushstrokes. So what you're not seeing in this picture is that if you look really closely at this mountaintop here, can you see my cursor? Where I'm showing that all the way on the right here?
For a second, but now I can't see it anymore. Oh, there it is.
Well, if you get close to that, what you see is this, which is not what you expected, but is what my AI sees. And, we know that things are not as they seem, and different animals see things differently, and so do AIs. So why not play with that? Another example here, if you look down on the street, if you get really close, you'll see this. And At this scale, that is completely concealed. I'm not, messing with you. This is what I'm about to zoom in on. This cathedral here is actually in this picture. But when you zoom in, you can see it's got this crazy religious experience, kind of psychedelic dreaming going on. So
Wow,
it turns
yeah.
out that there's really only 3 ways to experience this sort of artwork. And the first 2 are by immersively viewing it either with a projection or a display. This is at UC San Diego's Qualcomm Institute. This is a giant multi-screen display that can display up to 66 megapixels, which was the first time I ever got to see my own work immersively. And that was really a great day, I have to tell you. You can also do this in VR. I've had the good fortune of having seen my own work in VR in both Google and Facebook's VR labs, and that's been really fun. I hope someday that that'll be more widely available. But what we can certainly do for now is we can print it big. And I've taken to printing on tension fabric light boxes, typically 8 feet high. These works for various exhibitions and conferences and so on. These are 3 8x16-foot pieces that this is at a week-long exhibit and lecture that I gave at Google's headquarters in Mountain View in Silicon Valley. I also tend to do, there we go, 8 by 12 feet. This was at an art and tech fair up in Seattle. And 8 by 8. This was at an art fair in Miami during Art Basel. And this was a real eye-opener for me, this event, because it was a contemporary art fair. And from a distance, my dreamscapes, my AI-augmented landscapes appear to be landscapes. They're very nicely shot landscapes, but they just appear to be landscapes. And what I noticed was a lot of people walking by would be questioning, why is that even here? This is a contemporary art fair. Why is a postcard-like picture of a landscape even here? And only about half of the people would actually have the curiosity to come up close and discover that, oh my God, this is not what I thought it was at all. It's really quite lovely. That experience frustrated me. It started to drive me crazy. A lot of people were missing my work, even when presented in, well-attended art fairs, because they just didn't think it fit and they would just walk on by from 20 feet away. So about a year ago, it occurred to me that I could take a detail of one of these landscapes and through a process of upscaling and multiple passes of dreaming, I could have my cake and eat it too. I could create a piece that from a distance, say this was 8 by 8 feet, is clearly hallucinatory. So it's going to grab you. This is something different. And yet when you get close, there are even other unexpected details within that give you that surprise and delight that I was going for and that get you to question your expectations. About, over time, I created quite the collection of this. I then, figured out these don't just have to be details. I can actually do this with a full scene through a combination of downscaling and then upscaling in multiple stages. In this case, in 3 passes of dreaming. So we have an initial pass at the far distance. Again, this would be an 8 by 8 foot scene. And then there's this secondary dreaming that occurs at this stage where you start to see the rectilinear shapes. And then a third pass where within you're getting these curly cues. So this collection has been my most well received to date. This is what's going to be featured in the next issue of SciArt magazine. It really worked. When I went back 2 years later to Miami for this Art Palm Beach art fair, it got a lot more attention. There were very few people that would walk by this thing without stopping and trying to figure out what they were seeing. So it really worked. I was invited to do a number of solo exhibitions. This was at the launch of the Institute for Human-Centered AI at Stanford University. These are some famous AI researchers here. This was an 8 by 16 piece of a Hawaiian scene that I dreamed this way. This was I was the only artist invited to exhibit at last year's GPU Technology Conference in San Jose. This got a lot of great response. I had multiple people told me that it literally moved them to tears, which was like, wow, that was like music to my ears. This is
That's
now,
amazing. Yeah,
yeah,
what nice feedback to get, right?
yeah, really, really. This one guy actually posted a video on Instagram. He was breathless. He was like shaking. It was really, really great to affect people that way. This is now installed permanently in Google's San Francisco office. And this actually, Google's been a great partner. Joseph Smar, my genius engineering collaborator from Google, is the guy all the way on the left. This is at the Google headquarters in, not headquarters, office in Chelsea, New York City. This was a Central Park scene, obviously fitting being New York. And there's another Google employee here on the right, Dave Orr, who is one of my first collectors of commissioned work. He commissioned me to do a custom dreamscape of a family property that now sits on his dining room wall, 9 feet wide by 51.5 inches high and backlit, which is kind of fun.
Amazing.
So that's kind of what I've been mostly doing.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, I can see how, you know, when you start out with those broader view landscapes, which still have those details in it, but you have to get really close to, you know, actually experience them versus your kind of blown up macro views, how something like VR could really lend itself to your work. So hopefully we'll be able to see that someday.
Yeah,
do you want to tell
absolutely.
us a little bit about what you've been working on recently?
Sure. Let's start with Swan Song, which before the pandemic was what I was spending most of my time on. You know, I've done a lot of photo expeditions to national parks and beautiful spots all over the world in the last 10 years. And I've seen an alarming amount of devastation, forest loss due to global warming and tree diseases like beetle bark infestation and so on. And it's really made me stressed out. It's given me a real increased sense of urgency to capture these scenes before they go away. And not much is being done in that area, and it's driving me crazy. And I had to ask myself, like, what can I do to make a difference? So I came up with this concept of an immersive exhibition for a venue like, say, Art Tech House in New York City or Atelier des Lumières in Paris, where they use all these digital projectors to immerse you completely in a live physical space to kind of show what's at risk of being lost, not to bum you out, but to maybe, I hope, channel what more and more people are experiencing as ecological grief into action. The hope was that when you exit the experience, there are volunteers from various climate organizations happy to sign you up to volunteer or to donate or whatnot. So I was working on that. I developed a vision page, which you can get to directly via the URL swansong.ai, where it starts with a 6-minute, I think, video. It would actually probably be a 30-minute experience, but I worked hard to do sort of a concept video of what this experience would be like to the best of my ability. I would ideally work with motion graphics artists to do some compelling transitions and so on. And I wrote up the description of what I want to do with this and what I'm trying to do. So have a look at that when you have a chance, swansong.ai. And then during the pandemic, I've actually been quite busy. One thought that I had was, speaking of Earth, you know, what about placing these dreamscapes within the context of where they actually are on the planet? And I'm a big fan of Google Earth, and I knew that, you know, news organizations and so on have ways of animating Google Earth and creating videos. So it turns out that I did a little Googling, and Google Earth Studio is a powerful free animation tool that you have to register to get. You have to apply to get access to. But it's kind of like Adobe After Effects for Google Earth, and it allows you to set the time and place of, like in this case, exactly where and when I shot the various scenes, and create a smooth video. And I did about a handful of these that you can get to directly from my Dreamscapes portal page, which the shortcut there is dreamscapes.ai. And the collection is called Dreamscapes in Context. So I'll just show you some screenshots from the video. It starts from outer space and you go flying into, in this case, Switzerland. And it takes you to the exact spot where I captured this, giant landscape panorama at that date and time of day where the sun was and everything. I then smoothly transitioned to my dreamscape from that point of view. And then with nice music, typically make sure whenever you look at my videos, turn the sound on. They don't all have sound, most of them do. And it takes you through so that you can see the details and eventually backs you back out. So that's one thing I've been working on. More recently, I've been working on what I call refracted dreaming. This is in my Infinite Dreams collection, which is my latest collection. My own art over this last decade or so has taken an arc not unlike that of the history of landscape painting. It started with the computational techniques being very representational, landscapes that looked a lot like Hudson River School paintings. And then with the dreaming, it kind of became impressionist, kind of a 21st century impressionism. So it seemed natural to me to explore cubism-inspired refracted dreaming, as I call it. So I created a series of these that people seem to really like, and you can find those again on my Dreamscapes portal page, dreamscapes.ai, in the collection called Infinite Dreams. So that's what that's all about. I even tried to mess around a little bit with forced perspective, just playing around graphically with the possibilities. So that's been my most recent work.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that Google program sounds really interesting. Definitely have to check that out. A reminder to everyone who's tuned in, if you have a question for Daniel, please submit it in the Q&A chat box and we'll get to as many as we have time for. So this is a weird time to be an artist and try and have exhibits, but there have been a lot of creative solutions to the situation that we're in right now. So how can we see your work right now, Daniel? How do we keep up with what you're up to? Do you have shows that have been planned for the future that we can mark our calendars for?
Yeah, there's actually something coming up really soon. It has been a bummer. I've had a number of high-profile exhibition opportunities that have gotten scuttled or either completely canceled or just online. I submitted a piece for CADF, the Contemporary and Digital Art Fair. I was actually in their show in Miami in December, and their next one was planned for Paris. So that would have been really nice. I got accepted, and it's since turned to be an online show, but it's coming up really soon. It's free. I really encourage you guys to go to cadf.art to see what they're doing. They're using, I think they're taking a very interesting approach to an online art fair. In this case, for something completely different, I'm doing something that I hope I don't have to do again. This is my first and hopefully last political art piece. It's called Pestilent Trump. And you can learn all about it at pestilenttrump.com. You just got to make sure you spell pestilent correctly. So a couple of years ago, I was so infuriated by the so-called family separation policy that the Trump administration haphazardly implemented on our southern border. And it made me take his official portrait and dream it with the creepiest, creepy crawly creature kind of dreaming style that I could find. And it helped me get some of that anger out. And here we are 2 years later, and we have this pestilence that's affecting everyone, that's being incredibly mishandled by this administration, the coronavirus. So I thought it would be a good time to maybe take this up a notch and I refined that what was initially a tweet on a small image, which I called Baby Snatcher in Chief, and turned it into this pestilent Trump piece, which is meant to be 8 by 8 feet. And it starts with a cropped version of his official White House portrait, which is in the public domain. It was shot by a staff photographer, and it's open for anyone in the US to use. What you're not seeing here is when you get really close, you'll see that he is completely infested with all sorts of creepy reptilian and amphibious and spider-like creatures, which would be a great surprise walking up to this, because in his official portrait, he's bearing this very benign, avuncular smile. But I think he's really a miserable person, and this is maybe what is truly going on with this guy. So it should be quite the shocking piece. I created a video to support this online. In the video, be sure to turn your sound on. You will be even more creeped out when you do that, which is part of the effect I'm going for. But ultimately, what I had hoped would be an 8 by 8 foot light box. This is a simulation. And I think it would be quite the, sorry, it's not advancing right now. There we go. It would create quite the stir. But I really don't want to leave you with this image. I really tend to focus on underscoring the beauty in this world. And so this is not that. So I'm going to leave you with this image, which is a scene on the coast here where I live, just a couple miles up the road.
Well, I sincerely hope all of your exhibits find their way back into everyone's calendars somehow, and you get to show all those pieces you've been planning for. So we have a few questions in from the audience. Again, if you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A chat box. I also see a few in the chat function that we'll get to. There is a question about exactly how the AI style is chosen, or how that works. You know, did you have a large hand in developing exactly the types of fractal-ish imagery which your specific program ends up repeating and having this sort of stylistic about it, where, you know, once you zoom in, your pieces do have this similarity between them? So was that something that just kind of happened, or was that something that you dictated with the engineers that you worked with? Or yeah, if you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the main job that the engineers had to do was to turn what was demo software into something that could work at scale. So their job was really turbocharging or upscaling DeepDream to work on giant images. Out of the box, DeepDream was just not designed to work on multi-100 megapixel images. It would just crash. But the training data set that the folks at Google originally used, being in the public domain, is something that I could safely use. And it's fairly rich. It's got an infinite number of sort of variations within a limited repertoire. There are 84 layers in its neural network, each one of which creates a slightly different dreaming style that tends to range from, at the highest level, very abstract and impressionistic, you know, modifying curves, you know, edges and shapes, to, as you go deeper down, it's starting to get more literal and animalistic as it's trying to find the things it was trained to look for, which are, in often cases, it was trained on photos of people, animals, pets, you know, insects, even buildings and objects and cars. So each of those layers then has 4 parameters that are sliders that can change the intensity and scale of the dreaming features, things like octave and scale factor and so on. So that's why I say I've got an infinite amount of variation within a limited repertoire. I tend to prefer the abstract impressionistic effects, but there are times it makes sense to go literal and animalistic, like in a forest scene or in a, you know, the pestilent Trump scene. I had reason to do that. So
sure. Yeah, I wonder within a single, yeah, absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. This makes me wonder, within a single photograph or a single work, do you alter those levels in different sections of the work, or is it just kind of
Yeah,
a setting for the whole
no, no,
team?
no. That's part of what makes this tool feel like no other tool and like a true collaboration. I can set the direction of the dreaming style that my AI goes off into, but I can't control the details. What I can do,
Gotcha.
because you can't run this stuff on your laptop either. This is on a monster compute server with 4 GPUs up on the Amazon cloud. One of the benefits of that is I can do 4 dreaming tests at a time, at least at low to medium resolution. So it allows me to have a fairly heavy hand in setting the direction, and the ability to look at a lot of options to get the look that I'm going for. Uh, Once I have that, then I can send the full scale job off to render. And that could take overnight, typically, sometimes a day and a half. It has been getting faster over time as Amazon has been upgrading the GPUs under the hood without even charging me any extra, which is great. But it takes a while, and if usually I get back what I wanted, sometimes I have to even redo that. But no, I mean, like, it does seem to have like a mind of its own. I can't really control the details, and that's part of what I like about it, because it ends up surprising me, and it really feels like a collaboration.
Yeah, it sounds like a very dynamic way to make work. I mean, your materials as an artist, they always interact with you somehow, but that seems
Mhm.
like it's like kind of on the next level.
Indeed.
um, well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions, but thank you so
Okay.
much, Daniel, for sharing your work with us and for being here on Lunch Break. For those of you tuned in, thank you for tuning in. As you know, Lunch Break is a series of interviews with artists who have been in our exhibitions or residency program. So please join us on June 3rd at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Lunch Break with Brittany Ransom. And if you want to stay up to date on our activities, you can join our mailing list at SciArtinitiative.org. So until next time, Daniel, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.